Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Daniel. This is Talking With, and today I have Dr. Jared Ball in here with me. So, how you doing, man?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing
Good
all
to
right.
be
I'm
here.
I'm doing all right. So, we start these with the same two, three, four foundational questions, and then, as I told you off mic, there are no rules. So,
Right on.
who do you support if you support anybody?
Mm. So my youngest, who's the real enthusiast, is a Liverpool fan. So
Oh, wow.
out of fealty to her, I will support Liverpool. But generally, I don't have a specific team, and I will often default to teams that have the most Africans on them, and then kind of go from there. And then other than that, I kind of get caught up in the story, maybe of a moment or something like that. But at this point, I can't say I'm a legit supporter of any one team.
What country or countries do you support if you support any?
Oh, none. Again, I don't support any, and I generally, to be fair and perfectly honest, root against the United States. So that would be the team, that would be the nation I'm supporting. But I have to say, so because usually, as I said a moment ago, I will default to the team with the most African players on it. The U.S. squad is really testing me. They're getting more and more African descended players on the squad, and it's sometimes harder for me to root against them just because of the, I don't know, that sort of silly, somewhat of a silly Pan-African symbolic connection.
Mm.
But there is no one nation that I will support.
Yeah, so I feel you on that one because people normally assume, like, once I tell them, they assume I'm American. And genuinely, if you look at the passport, it's true. But I was born in Canada,
Mhm.
and my father's from Uganda, so I have those links. But if when people ask, like, so who do you support? You support Canada, right? And I'm like, to be honest, I root against them.
Right.
And America, I mean, I actively root against them. I think you used the right words. Like I hope they lose,
Yeah.
and it makes me feel good when they lose. But
Yeah.
that's for a myriad of political reasons, which we might be able to get into. Third foundational question: where did you grow up? Like, where were you born? Where did you grow up?
I was born in Washington, D.C., and then from about 5 on, I grew up in where I live now in Columbia, Maryland, which is
Cool.
about 45 minutes north.
And then the last foundational question is and I've learned to ask this one over the course of this kind of spin-off series, if you will. What, if any, was the extent to your playing career if you had one?
Oh, I did. And
Oh, okay. See, now I didn't know
it
this.
was,
Okay, here we go.
oh, it was star-studded. No, I'm just playing. No, I did, because out here in Columbia, Maryland, that was the number one sport. It's not American football. It was world football. And that was the preference for my mother, who didn't want me to play American football, even though I was probably physically more suited to that, just sort of as a natural build. So I played from, the peewee ages. Technically, I played throughout high school, but I would say really the career ended after about 8th or ninth grade. And I played striker as a young kid, but my real position was goalkeeper, where I was, for that age, for that time, pretty nice. And I enjoyed it. And a little traveling. So yeah, that was it. But that was the extent of the playing career.
Interesting. Like I don't think you've ever mentioned it. So if you guys don't know, Jared does Black Power Media, and I mix what I like. I probably should have asked you, like, where can people find you on the internet, and what are your media platforms? So let's get that out of the way. 5 minutes. Yeah.
As for me, the easiest is always imixwhatilike.org. And from there, you can find the work that I and we do at Black Power Media on YouTube, and my show, I Mix What I Like, on YouTube, and everything else. But if it's me you're looking for, imixwhatilike.org has everything from my written work, my longer history in radio and other journalism and academic work, and everything else. But Black Power Media is really where we're trying to get everybody to spend some time right now. So yeah.
Yeah, like, I don't watch that much YouTube, if I'm honest with you. But it is good to
Good
find
for you.
pockets. It is good to find pockets of, oh, like I can actually sit down and watch this and feel like I'm being fulfilled or, satisfied in some way. So whenever I watch your show and like the shows that are going on, like the Remix Morning Show or whatever it may be, they tend to pick fun at you whenever you bring up footballers, football players, etc. So I
Yeah,
was like, hey man, I might as well open up the space so you can at least
I
have one homie that
appreciate
you could
that.
talk to about the sport. But knowing that you played, I think it might make a little bit more sense. So whenever I talk to people from the States, there tends to be like the pay for play thing that we talk about. So I wonder, as someone who's a bit older, was that still part of the US system when you were growing up? Where was your mother having to pay for you to play? Were you just there because you were nice and people found a way to get you on the team?
Oh no, definitely was not that. I was not sponsorable. It was nothing like that. But it was certainly not what it is today. We were a very I guess what they would have called lower middle class for the suburbs. I lived in the hood, so we were Section 8, suburban Section 8 is the way I jokingly phrase it. All of that is technically true, but that's where we were. But it was not. It was still in the suburbs. And so I'm not entirely sure what the financial structure was, but it could not have required the kind of money that it requires for my daughter to now play. We would never have been able to afford that, and in some ways, we barely could afford it now. But so no, it was very different. I think it was much more. If you could afford, the cost would have come at the quality of your cleats, maybe. But everything from uniforms to even, I guess, the cost for being on a team or travel was not. I don't even know that it was anything at the time. This would have been in the late 70s, early 80s. And I'm not entirely sure when and how it changed, but I kind of feel like I got in and out before it became, something serious and definitely not what it is today.
So did you grow up a fan of not just playing, but as a fan of the sport? Like, did you grow up like idolizing maybe Pele or Maradona? Perhaps is more of your age bracket. Like, what were there opportunities for you to watch and partake in the sport outside of just playing it, based on the availability in the United States, which didn't really pop off until maybe like 10, 15 years ago?
Very little. So we would see sort of like rare VHS footage of Pele. So we would idolize him, but in some abstract way where you never really, it was more myth than anything we got to see. So to this day, I'll still go and when I see these YouTube clips of him and others, I mean, I'm like, no wonder, the myth almost wasn't big enough in some cases. But so no, we didn't get to see it. And so I became a fan of all the other sports, basketball, American football, to a lesser extent, baseball. We would rarely get a chance to see a game. There was a little bit of interest in indoor soccer, I remember, at one point in the mid 80s. And by the time MLS emerged and all of that, I had completely left the sport in terms of I always appreciated it and sort of missed it as a kid, as a player, but I never. It wasn't until the early 2000s and then the sort of 2010 and on, after my second daughter was born, and the availability, the ubiquity of the game on digital media and all that, that's when it really, my love of the game started to ramp back up. And then and I was just, reminded of what I loved as a kid and a young adult. So, but yeah, no, it was very difficult to see. I almost never saw a game.
Wow.
As a kid.
So I guess what I'm trying to loosely combine with those two questions is, do you think there is a specific reason why particular people are categorized into playing particular sports? And do you think there, perhaps in America, is a sort of protection over football or soccer to be played by certain people who can afford to play it, and certain people are funneled into other sports that perhaps make more money, perhaps drive whatever economic considerations? Because I tend to feel like that's kind of what it is. That if you gave African people, if you gave Latin people a particular, like if they were given in your era the choice to play between the sports, perhaps more people would have gone and played football, but they were funneled into American football, basketball. And I wonder if you've ever considered maybe why that might be.
Oh, I think about it all the time, and I have to say that for as much as I think about it, I have not followed up with the requisite level of study. So everything I'm about to say is sort of put together through speculation and oversimplified. Seriously, because I don't want to. I like to respect real study.
Right.
And when I've engaged in it, and when I do engage in real study, I can recognize when others have not. So I know that there will be people out there who have really studied this who will find flaws in what I'm about to say. But they should hit me up and correct me, So that's it. Okay. Mm-hmm. So the short answer is absolutely. Everything is political and everything is connected to power. On some level, that's just objective fact. There's no area that you can study that I'm aware of where you would be able to avoid this reality. So there is this history and connection between colonialism and sport, between the use of sport as both a way to let working class and enslaved and colonized people blow off steam and to also entertain the rich. There is, when it comes to certainly the United States, and I would imagine elsewhere, but I'm more familiar with here, the racial component that comes along with colonization. There is this desire among whites and white elites in particular to be entertained by their colonized and enslaved populations, and to pit them against one another. The worst form, of course, pitting of enslaved Africans against one another, pitting, captured folks at any point in history, as has been done all over the world, against one another for sport and pleasure and enjoyment of the rich and the distraction of the masses. All of this is there is a political economy of sport. There is a relationship of capital and wealth creation and colonization to all of this. So when it comes to the sports here in the United States specifically, on one hand, I think the United States and its desire to always be some exceptional entity has never wanted to be part of what a world body is participating in. So they're happy to be exclusive. On the other hand, the United States has never been able to control the sport. There is FIFA. There are international bodies at play that protect against, to a certain extent, a monopoly of North American authority, of United States authority. So for instance, in the past, there was that one moment, I forgot exactly when, but there was a discussion of bringing world football here to the United States, and television advertisers and networks wanted it broken into 4 quarters like basketball. And with commercial breaks. No, it's hilarious. It's ridiculous. And of course, FIFA and everybody was like, are you insane? And then, of course, FIFA has known, and as world football has known quite well, no one is suffering from a lack of sponsorship or advertising revenue. It's not like the Premier League or La Liga or even Ligue 1. It's not like they're suffering. So it's not like they haven't figured out how to capitalize through advertising on their sport. But they were just saying, the U.S. just can't have that kind of authority. You just can't have, So I'm sure the U.S. in part took that in, as the U.S. often does, and says, well, okay, fine, we'll just, target a different form of sport that we can connect to some false narrative and mythology around American exceptionalism and toughness and strength, and we'll call it football almost out of spite. Yeah, I know that's not the official history, but I've always just kind of like, But then there is this other. So of course, once that is established, I mean, I remember as a kid, even when we would fantasize about pro careers, you're not going to point to the Pele or the Maradona or whoever that you never see. You're going to point to, well, for my childhood, Dr. J was the first one I remember. That's who everybody wanted to be. And that's basketball, because that's what you see on TV, and that's who you assume, So when you realize there's a cap on your career, that if you play soccer, basically it's going to end at high school, maybe college, and there's no professional opportunity, the kid wanting to use sport to get out of desperation is going to go to another sport. The same thing happens in reverse in terms of world football, and I'll just stop here, so I'm not just talking the whole time. But for all that, well, I mean, but for all that Africans and Latin Americans and Europeans love world football, the youth would change if for some reason a more dominant business model in sport took over and another sport surpassed football as a potential for revenue and fame. Certainly to get the love of football, it's not inherent, it's imposed, and it came with European colonization and slavery. So throughout Africa and Latin America, it is as British an export as the language I'm speaking now. So it comes with that with it. So that's why you would see in just as colonization works, people revert to the metropole of their colonial settings. So, the Senegalese go to France and Jamaicans go to London and, Mexicans come to the United States. That you gravitate to the center. That's where people migrate to the center of their colonial relationships. And it's the same thing happens with sport. And we're seeing a creeping change, by the way, as Americans see a pathway to business and fame and professional careers, both men and women. You're going to see more go in that direction. Oh, the last part of that I really speculate on is that I really do think the United States, in terms of its national team's representation, wants as white a team as possible. And one way you can sort of correct for that is to raise the cost of participation in the sport. And by definition, you're going to make sure Black and brown kids go to other sports because soccer is way more expensive to participate in from childhood, especially if you want to become serious and especially if you want to be seen. You really have to get into certain academies and locations and just spaces. So even if you have to make it to college, that again is another barrier, a class and race-based barrier. And now that we've seen the Supreme Court's ruling, it may be even worse. So the point I'm getting at is that there is a politics to this. And I do think, and by the way, I think the biggest concern of the U.S. men's national team at this point is that there aren't too many Latinos. And I think I really do think that they fear they would be, even in this case, happier to see more Black players than players with Hernandez and Sanchez. And
that's interesting.
Anyway, so
that's interesting.
Yeah, I'll stop there, but that's what I think. Yeah.
No, I was just to piggyback off that last point. I was thinking two things. The first thing I was thinking was it's quite interesting how football for the majority of the world is a poor man's sport. If you go to Brazil, if you go to the continent, if you go to Asia, if you go anywhere, it's a poor person's sport. Like it's a sport of the people, it's a sport of the masses. When you come to America, it's sequestered and it's left to the white children in the suburbs who have the money to play. And then I've just forgotten the next thing I was going to say. but
that's the point, though.
Yeah.
But to Europe, Africa and Latin America have become their colonized, at least for world football, their colonized territory. So you need that barrier of entry to be low because that's the community you want to cull from, that you want to help populate your leagues and your teams, and eventually even to switch in citizenship. I mean, we see so many Latin Americans and Africans at some point in their early lives building some relationship with one or another European nation. So in the hopes that they might be able to cash in that citizenship at a point, at a particular moment. And that's why you even see brothers from the same family make different decisions. We see it happen throughout Europe as well. You see the same thing happening with Irish and Scottish players having to make a decision at a certain point. Am I going to play for England or so everybody starts going to their colonial territories. That's why I look at the French national team. I think is there maybe three at most starters who are white Europeans in that last World Cup. Almost Lloris and Griezmann are the only two I can think of off the top of my head who I know started.
We noticed that by the end of the final, there was only one white person that was that was in the 11. Basically, it was Lloris, and then you saw the French team, like when they kind of lined up with 10 with the arms around. it might as well been Mali, Senegal, Guinea, Burkina Faso.
Exactly.
Like it could have been any of those countries. So like that was quite obvious. And then like Lloris just being dreadful at saving penalties.
And saying so, that was crazy. Why? He said, "I'm not good at this." It's like, well, get good at it, my man.
But like if you consider that Mike Maignan, who is the number one at AC Milan, arguably the best goalkeeper in Italy, should have been in that team. The whole 11 would have been African people, and they probably win. They probably win if they have Maignan.
Now imagine that. Exactly. Imagine that.
And I've recollected my memory. I was thinking football is more for the poor, but in America it's been flipped. I guess the conclusion that goes unspoken is that in America, the sport for poor people is more, or just lower classes, would be American football, would be basketball, would be things that, you know, there's a basketball hoop everywhere. There's a field that you can play football anywhere, American football. But increasingly, if you look at the sports, like especially if you look at like quarterback and things like that, the amount of money that people are putting into making their children the next quarterback or the next great wide receiver, or if you look at like the NBA draft or just players like Dale Curry, for instance, he has two sons who are Seth Curry and Steph Curry. Gary Payton's son is in the league. Like you can just go through all the players who are in the league, and it's like, well, even the sports that we consider are ways for people, like rare instances for people to shoot up and just get out of whatever class situation they're in. Increasingly, it's becoming like your father or your grandfather was in the league, was in the association, and now you have better access to whatever training, whatever knowledge base that kind of gives you a fast track into the NBA, the NFL, whatever it is. So even in sports here that we consider, oh, that's more for the masses. The top echelon of those are being filled with, I mean, legacy candidates, if you will. So there's no real good option. You know?
Well, I mean, even before, it's never really been an option in terms of the collective.
Based on numbers.
But to your point, not only is what you're saying true, but you have an influx of more international players who at one point flipping the script would have been playing world football, who are now finding a pathway to the NBA and riches there, who are coming from Europe, the continent of Africa, Latin America. So even the Black American pathway to success has been limited by just global competition of the labor force. And I mean, even, you know, Bill Rhoden,
the best example with that.
Exactly. Actually. There's no Black players left in there. Or not many, if any, are playing anymore.
Well, it depends on your definition of Black, because there are African people in Major League.
No, I meant Black American.
Black American. Right.
Yeah. If we're talking about strictly Black American, there's, I think, one or none at this point. It's very few. And, that's wild. It's amazing to think that was even a possibility. But of course it is, because you just expanded the labor market and there's talented, desperate people all over the place. So if they start, and Latin America has its own long history in terms of baseball being brought there by colonizing powers, and in some cases used directly to as a bulwark against rebellion. There's always this article I cite that makes a reference to some military leader from the U.S. talking about we better give these Latinos baseball bats instead of rifles, or they're going to pick up rifles and take to the hills in rebellion. So there's, I can get you the source when we wrap up. But yeah, it's. So anyway, my point is that it's of course, and Bill Rhoden wrote that a few years ago, famously, the $40 million slave book, where he's talking about this whole phenomenon of the 15th guy on the bench on an NBA roster is now, from Europe or Asia, or now, and by now, since that book is written, is probably Black American, as Europeans start to take over and become more dominant in the game. That 15th, man on the bench, could be Black. Anyway, so all that to say, it's all very much connected, I think, to the political economy of any given society. That in some cases you want the barrier of entry to be low, and even for Black people here, in terms of basketball, the barrier of entry is still relatively low financially, but increasingly the prospects at the top are changing, and they can't quite as easily. Black people are not in a position to make that adjustment and say, well, you know what? More opportunities are happening to open up in world football. Let me put my kids into that because it's too much money. So there it is. That's, the conundrum as I see it. Yeah.
So I think I've heard you say that like you used to like you were really heavy into the NFL. If you're in Maryland, probably the right? The Washington football team.
The Commanders. They're now the Commanders. The Washington Commanders.
Right. What turned you off American sports in that way? And then maybe in addition to that, how do you square, I suppose, the contradiction of still enjoying football, like actual soccer?
So honestly, I don't fully enjoy world football or football in the way that I would have ever loved any other sport, in part because of the reasons why I can't follow sports here in the US anymore with any real. I mean, I was just maybe one step below your insane rabid lunatic fan for a long time. I've been in arguments and fights over fandom. I've been in, lost friendships and other relationships over fan bases. I mean, I've been, I went to that Washington football teams, with the old name. I was in a lot of games. I'm even, if anybody ever looks up the famous game against the Falcons and Deion Sanders, where everybody threw the seat cushions at RFK Stadium in DC, I started that. I'm the one I started that.
You threw the first seat cushion?
I threw the first one with intent, and I literally got two going in because I knew I was throwing one and I was going to keep the other as a souvenir. Oh, wow. And I did for a long time, and I just threw it away maybe 5-6 years ago when I just couldn't have that logo and I couldn't tolerate even the souvenir. So, but over time, just as I started paying more attention, first of all, as I started learning more and becoming more radical in my analysis and my worldview, and then I just started paying more attention to the business model, the treatment of players and workers and women who work there, either as cheerleaders or elsewhere in the organization. It's too much. It's just too much. And then you add, in terms of that sport, all the CTE, and you start, the more I pay attention to the violence of the game, the more even the one time I thought I was going to play, and I was on because that football team used to train where I went to undergrad, and I still had this fantasy that I was going to be a walk-on on the team. And I went to a practice one day and I saw up close on the sideline a real live scrimmage and the violence of a real live scrimmage. And I was just saying, so TV doesn't, even being live in the stadium doesn't really do it justice. The speed and the violence of the contact. And I was just like, man, I'm not really built for this. Maybe physically, but not emotionally and mentally. Yeah. I was like, man, but my point is that, and then you get, before even all and then I had already inheriting this from what I had learned about my father. I had already been, I had never stood for the national anthem. So as that was increasingly attached through Pentagon propaganda to the NFL, because I hope, many people don't even know this, but this whole thing of standing for the national anthem was not always a part of all of these games. That was early 2000s propaganda payment from the Pentagon that even started all that nonsense. But all of that just became too much. And so for instance, I mentioned a minute ago, I would watch the U.S. men's national team play, and I see all these black players, and I start feeling that solidarity and that brotherhood. And I'm like, and it's hard for me not to start rooting for them. Mm-hmm. But then the camera pans to the crowd, and it's all these white faces and red, white, and blue, and all the flags. And I'm like,
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, no, that's exactly why. Never mind, lose. I hope you all lose.
If anything, it makes the relationship worse.
Absolutely.
Because it's like,
No, you're
oh,
right.
I see what's happening here again. It's like, oh, black labor, black work being exploited for
Yes.
who? For who?
And that's it. And that moment, I know you know about. You remember this. That moment when Sancho and Saka and who else missed those penalties? Rashford. We saw what the reactions were. I know they're playing for the empire. I know they're playing for the enemy. But I felt so much pain for them. Like, you don't deserve to have your whole humanity assaulted because you missed a penalty. And we know what that was. It was, as you said a moment ago, black labor working for that white colonial empire. And when they failed their mission, they were just destroyed. And in some cases, I don't know if Sancho's ever recovered. But anyway, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say I'm doing a bit of writing on something close to that subject as well. So I've been doing quite a bit of research into it. And the saddest thing I found was Saka. He said as soon as he missed, he knew he was going to be racially abused.
Yeah.
Like the second he missed, he knew they're going to be on me effectively. What does it mean that a 19-year-old, or he might have been 18 or 19, but what does it what does it mean for him that he knows this is what it is at 18, 19? Like that reality. It's like it's a kind of stark situation. But you were going to say.
Well, I was going to say, if he knew that immediately after, it meant he at least unconsciously knew it going in.
Before, right.
And that's what, of course he knew that. Even I felt that as a youngster. You could see when some white parent or opposing team's parent, you could see the venom in their eyes as they're maybe even saying something, even officially that should be sort of benign, technically, but you could see it. So of course, at that level, and all the stuff that they say on the sidelines, all the stuff we hear in the stadium, just in the seats. And with the whole thing with Vinicius lately, with La Liga, oof. I mean, it's this stuff, I can't even, honestly, I can't even imagine how they handle that and how that doesn't have some sort of long-lasting permanent damage.
Yeah, you see, so this is our first time speaking, so you would have probably little idea. But I support, I don't even like saying it. They tell me my team is Chelsea. Okay.
I forgot to ask. Yes. Okay.
So I picked my team. This was another thing.
And what do you mean they told you? Who's the they? How did that work?
There is no they. I'm just trying to make it less. So I picked my team in 2001. So my dad brought home FIFA 2002 on the video game. And I have this thing where I can't support teams that wear red. So United, Liverpool, Arsenal, they were never an option for me, just because whatever childish thing. I was 11. I'm born in 1990. So they were never options. Chelsea was the best team on the game that wore blue. And as we said, there was really no way to watch football at that point. So I was basically left to video games. So Chelsea were my team. And then when you put in the game, they had Hasselbank, Babayaro, Desai. Like they had black players in their team. So I was like, okay, I could rock with these dudes. Come to find that Chelsea have one of the worst racist reputations in England. It's Chelsea, it's Millwall. There's another team, Leeds, I think, is one of the other ones, but Chelsea and Millwall are the two that are just like, they're synonymous with racism. I didn't know I was going to grow up to be in like the football space, football writing. So when I started doing podcasts and I was talking with more people in London and the UK, they were like, Chelsea. So I would say I support Chelsea. And the tone of they would say Chelsea as if like you don't know any better. I was like, bro, I was 11. I didn't know about the racist connotations and everything. So one of the many incidents I could pick, actually, no, this is the incident where in 2015, you might remember that there was Chelsea were playing PSG in Paris, and there was a bunch of Chelsea fans who were on the train, and they blocked this African man in Paris from getting on the train. and said we're racist, we're racist. That's the way we like it, we like it, we like it. Blah 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 blah.
Wow.
And it was at that point where it's like a fork in the road. It's like I can't keep doing this because I know better now. I find it interesting when you say, like you went through your thing with the Washington football, the R's, and
The
now the Commandos
R's.
and all of that. And like you reach these moments where it's just I can't keep doing this. So since 2015, I've been slowly retreating back to where Chelsea are more like a sociological, anthropological experiment for me into what football fanism is, or what, like I can't even put it into words really. But yeah, it's I don't love my football team. I don't like my football team. Like if somebody asks me who do you support, I'll say Chelsea. But they don't give me enjoyment. I've said this on many occasions. They don't have the capacity to make me happy, but they can make me angry, which is like the worst place to be as a football fan. But when I hear you say you don't really watch the NFL anymore, I'd assume you probably don't watch the NBA anymore, things like that. Even in football, you're not escaping racism. So it's like how do you still watch if you're principled on one? What is is it just like because of your daughters and all of that? Or
I mean, that's a big part of it, but it's a contradiction. I admit it. I mean, I have no rational argument for it. I have no defense for it. I do. I mean, part of it is because I wanted, sometimes I try to rationalize it in the internationalism of it and the
you're stealing my.
I mean, all that. I mean, I do. I love. I do. I try to rationalize it that way, or I mean, it is a beautiful game to watch. I mean, I really do. When a game is played well, I know people say this about all the sports they like, and I guess it's true of all sports. But I just like watching it. Some of it brings me back to childhood. I don't know, all those things. And some of it, I just like I do like athletics. I like sport. I like seeing the best compete against each other. But no, I have no defense for it. I mean, it is an absolute contradiction. There's no, because it's not like, of course, there's no less racism. Certainly there's no less corruption in FIFA. Than in any other sport, right? I mean, and it is a rigged game, and even that is rigged. I mean, what is the likelihood that? I mean, without Messi, even Argentina, the likelihood that they're going to win the World Cup, they've had to have two of the best players ever in the history of the world. That's how much even they have had to compete with the most powerful and wealthy and resource nations.
Kind of their own fault, though. But,
I mean, you could say that, but I mean, I think it's. I don't know. Why do you say that? Because I mean, isn't it still?
In terms of Argentina, if you look into Argentinian history, they went on a genocidal campaign of their African population. So,
I see. Yeah.
So they forced people into Brazil, some went to Uruguay, but there was basically like an African cleansing in Argentina, where I'm like, maybe if you would have kept some of your Africans, maybe you could look more like Brazil in terms of the number of World Cups you picked.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. But again, I would even think that Brazil, maybe for that reason, is the exception in the sense that, and even they have had to pour. You know what? I don't know the answer to this. Does Brazil, I guess, per capita, spend more on the sport than other countries?
That's a good question.
Even in Europe, per their resources, do they spend more? Because part of the argument I was initially going to make is that the more resourced nations in Europe are going to have a leg up in terms of producing the amount of talent. And then because they can cull from their colonies, they're going to have even more. So that's why I'm saying Senegal is how many, I don't know, how many French colonial or former colonial Africans are on the French national team? And what is the likelihood that any of their individual home countries could ever get to that level, given the lack of resources, even with them all being African?
That's an interesting point. And obviously I don't have the numbers in front of me, but what's really interesting is African countries, in some ways, benefit more from the relationship than the would-be metropole. If you look at like
Hmm.
Algeria or Morocco or a lot of these teams in Africa, the players that play are players who weren't good enough to make the French team, weren't good enough to make the English team, weren't
Right.
good enough to make the whoever team, and then they get picked off, just like that second rate talent that England can't use or France can't use or Spain can't use or Portugal can't use. They just go play for Guinea-Bissau or
Right.
Equatorial Guinea or Algeria or whatever it is. So like there is like a weird dynamic where African countries sometimes benefit, but they don't benefit fully. That's part of it, but I don't know what you'd
No,
say
I
to
don't
that.
know either, but that's give my a couple things for us to follow up on. I would like to follow up on at least some of
For real,
that.
for real,
Like,
for
what?
sure.
How does this stuff work? Yeah.
You do a podcast or at least a show with Bro Diallo. He
So,
hates
Brother
sports.
Diallo, he hates what he calls the ball chasers.
Right, right.
So,
So
he's clarified himself
okay,
recently,
okay,
at
okay.
least from my vantage point, when he said that he doesn't like the ball chasers who are professional, who do it professionally and are sort of exploited as such. But he does like athletics and athletes. Yeah, I just want to. I think I've
I
clarified
was
his
yeah.
position a
I,
little.
I was just gonna use him as somebody who's perhaps emblematic of people who are just like, man, that sports stuff, man. Y'all spend way too much time
Oh,
talking
right, yeah, yeah,
about
yeah, yeah,
people
yeah,
who dribble basketballs or kick footballs or what.
yeah.
So I'm wondering for you, what usefulness do you see perhaps in the work that you do, whether it's in propaganda studies, communications, African studies, or just in terms of doing YouTube or whatever it is? What use do you see in sport that perhaps might go against that idea of you guys spend too much time focusing on people who dribble basketballs and kick footballs and throw footballs,
Well,
I
I
guess?
mean, for me, it's just like my answer would be the same as when I'm asked, well, why do you watch some commercial media product?
Mm.
Why, and then talk about that. You're wasting too much time talking about, some horrible propaganda, blah blah blah. So at least part of my answer is that, look, I know I have an interest in it, and I know whether a handful don't. Billions of people watch sports. Billions of people are watching sports, playing sports, thinking about sports, have family in sports, children in sports, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, work in some sports related field, something like that. And because so many of us are attracted and are in so many ways, we can at least make some value out of it by pointing to the way the political economy that we've been talking about is exposed in these areas.
Mm.
So if you watch a movie, and this is why I keep saying, if when it comes to media, if you like something that commercial media is delivering, it should be investigated and interrogated as a preference, as a former professor of mine used to say. But then it could also be used to say to investigate the process by which it became something you became aware of in the first place. What role or relationship to society or political economy, that is to power, does this media product play? And we've just used our love of world football to talk about any number of things, from race to class to immigration to colonization to capitalism and inequality to violence and even to the beauty and the love of a game. So that's really what, so it's my point is we can't deny that these things exist and have the attention of billions of people. So I think on some level we have to make what use we can of our recognition of it, and in some cases our love of it and our consumption of it, to understand what is going on in the world. So if we're going to watch Vinicius get called all these names, we should use that to investigate. Well, what is the nature of the relationship between Africans and sport, the game, and Spain in particular, to Spanish racism and so on, and then we can just keep on going. Yeah, that would be I think the only way I could, or the best way I could explain my work, or what I think my approach is, or why I think it's worth the time.
Like that's kind of when you said that it was a contradiction that you still enjoy watching football. I kind of feel the same way based on where I align politically or where I found myself. But I do feel like that answer basically encapsulates what it is. It's like if it's the world's most popular sport and people are watching it, then you can use what people are watching to highlight where people should be looking instead of just accepting that they're looking at whatever they're looking at. Like, well, why don't we investigate? Why do Spanish people feel this way? Why do Italian people feel this way? How does why is someone leaving Brazil in order to play in Spain in the first place? Like these different questions you can ask, and people will, oh, I know who Vinicius is. I know who Mbappe is. Well, if you know who Mbappe is, well, let's investigate. His mother's from Algeria, his father's from Cameroon. How do these things intersect to create Kylian Mbappe in France? So I feel like that could be the usefulness of football, at least on one level.
They just used Mbappe to give that statement against the uprisings, right? And some PR person wrote that statement and put his name and picture on it and said, this is your statement.
Right.
But look, I mean, look at the last World Cup. For anybody paying attention to the U.S. men's national team, when that white reporter who had been known to be a supporter of LGBTQ rights turns up dead.
What is his name?
Grant Wall. But the initial day or so, the idea was that he had been detained by Qatari officials and was done in because they had been, steadfast in their position that there will be no reference, there will be no rainbows, there will be no LGBTQ pride, nothing in their country. Now, it all turned out not to be true, as far as I'm aware, at least, as the reporting changed. But my point is, how could we not then raise questions from that moment in our classrooms, in our households, or where our meetings or wherever, of, well, why would Qatari officials have felt that way? Why do others feel the way they feel? What is the history in Qatar and in Islam and in the so-called Middle East and so on and so on and so on? There's so much that could be done with that beyond whatever was done. As a result of that. But my point is, the idea that sports don't already involve politics, so therefore we should ignore it, that would be foolish. Everybody's using it. Right. Qatar was certainly using the World Cup for something well beyond sport, as is FIFA, as is England with the Premier League. I mean, we would be foolish to think that everybody involved in ownership and management of the Premier League are just football fans. There's a lot going on here beyond just a love of the game. So if all we do is love the game, we're doing a disservice, especially if we want to be about some sort of revolutionary change in the world.
Well, the United States, they're not going to use the World Cup in 2026 for anything political.
Of course not.
The ball. No. They won't.
Not one flag will be waved, not one commercial, not one nothing. It'll be just about a love of the game. The only commercials we're going to see is PSAs for your local soccer camp. Oh my good! No, by the way, they're already. I think
that's the useful. But no,
go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, like, I feel like juxtaposing the media climate with Qatar will be very useful when you look at the United States in 2026, when gun violence, LGBTQ rights, that won't be brought up. It'll just be, this is the great freedom, and they'll drape themselves in the flag of Canada, America, Mexico, and everybody will just get along. But it's like, where's the critical eye that was turned to Qatar? How come that's not coming here? Well, and
now we all just cool. And as Americans, we all just cool with Mexicans now. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, are we cool
together for a month?
They're trying to build a wall. Right?
Together for a month. That's
what I'm saying. You were just talking about building a wall, and now we're going to co-host a world event that's supposed to unite humanity. If this is not already the most hypocritical World Cup, it's got to be the top 2, 3, something.
Also, it's like, is it really co-hosting? Because when I think Canada has like 2 cities of the 16. Mexico might have 2, maybe
That's
1.
how they bought the bid. That's all I'm saying. That's how they bought the bid, and this is part of the payment for losing the bid in Qatar. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. But the claim, at least, is that this is a joint venture. And it's about uniting the continent and uniting the world and this and that. And I'm like, you all were just building a wall 5 minutes ago. And as soon as these folks can find one more thing beyond healthcare to blame on Canada, don't think they're going to start trying to build a wall up there too. They're just happy that, Canada keeps staying to the right and suppressing its indigenous population. So the U.S. is happy.
You were going to say, though.
Anyway.
No, you had a point, and then I brought up.
Well, no, I mean, a buddy of mine is already talking about how we can, on some level, leverage for the struggle of Black people here in the U.S. The fact that there's going to be 6 cities here that are going to host World Cup games. This buddy of mine. It is more than that. I thought. Okay, maybe
I think that there might be 16 host cities. I think America might have 14 or 12. Yeah, it's.
Oh, my bad. I got whatever it is. But anyway, but the point was that he's looking to launch some journalistic venture that has these cities targeted with some sort of campaign that says, while you're hosting these games, look at the way these people are being treated. So my point is that there is always a politics to all of this, and in a way that people look to take advantage of moments beyond just being sports journalists or sports fans. So, anyway, so to say that we shouldn't bring some sort of political analysis to the sports world is, to me, silly. And to similarly dismiss it as not a space worthy of political analysis because it's just sport and entertainment is equally wrong. So,
cool.
Yeah.
So I have one more question, and then we normally do a quick fire round, but I don't have my thing, so maybe I'll pass on that one. But So the last question I had, after all this talking, and I might be putting you on the spot, and maybe it's not even your decision, but I'm curious what you would say. So let's say your daughter's really, really good at football, and she gets to a point where the U.S. women's national team comes and says, "We want you to play," or they're selecting people. Would you be comfortable with your daughter or your grandchild or anybody who you're related with playing with the United States men's or women's national team, or would you prefer they play for whoever they might be eligible for otherwise?
So my wife is from Panama. There is zero chance or threat of any time soon that Panama men or women are going to. I don't even think that Panama allows a women's team. Now that I'm thinking about it, I got to double check on that. Don't quote me on that.
That would be nuts.
But I think they have a real issue. They either don't have one or support it at all. But even the men are no threat to much less, other than that one sort of glitch, make it to a World Cup, much less win it. And at this point, I don't know what their eligibility would be. Anyway, so this would be my thing. One, I think would be interesting if I would ultimately support my daughter in anything that she did. I would just never ever stand for the national anthem. But I suspect that were she to be looked at and selected, that if they thought that this recent crew of Rapinoe and whoever was an issue with their activism and their analysis, I think they would be in for a world of trouble with my daughter. So But no, I mean, I think about that kind of stuff all the time, and it's a contradiction even at the level she plays at now. There's a social and class and racial contradiction that we experience now. And I think we all want to see on some level our children reach the highest levels of success in whatever they're doing. But that would be a particular challenge. But ultimately, it would be on her, and I would just support her no matter what. And if she was there, I just wouldn't stand for the national anthem, and then I would cheer her on individually, and probably quietly would hope that the team loses.
That's
Oh man, it's terrible. It's rough out here.
So we're at an hour. I think this might take 5 minutes. So I will try to remember the quickfire questions that I ask people. So the last good documentary you watched.
The last good documentary. Oh man, because we're going quickly, I'm just going to say Wormwood.
Interesting. And I'll
It,
say, by the way, like I normally
mm-hmm,
don't give answers, but when you mentioned the NFL, is it Dave Zirin who made a
mm-hmm.
really good documentary on like the NFL and the
He did.
pay and the propaganda that the U.S. military
Yep.
like pays the NFL to show like nationalist pageantry. That one's really interesting for people who might be interested. Your favorite skill move is one that I ask people.
Oh, I don't even know the name. That's what's most embarrassing. I don't know the particular name, but there's a move that when a player is being challenged by two people and they kind of do
The Cruyff turn? Like they kind of fake like they're gonna kick it and turn with it.
I will say that, but you know what? I saw a video that was showing how Pele was doing that way before Cruyff, and they just gave him the credit.
Bruh, that video is that is
you
an
know what I'm talking
amazing
about?
video, man.
Pele
That is
did
an
all those
amazing
moves.
shout out. I don't know who did that, but they did God's work.
They really
if
did.
you believe.
They really did. I don't believe, but I accept that. I accept the point that is being made there.
Right.
Because I mean, yeah, it's really what I have in my head. Maybe it's where they do that. It's like they step on the top of the ball and then there's a spin. And I'm actually seeing Ronaldinho doing it in my head now. And there's two players around him, and he does it. It's a spin with a touch on the top of the ball that pulls the ball, and then with the pull of the ball into the spin away from the two players.
That sounds like some Ronaldinho type stuff.
Yeah. So it's stuff like that. It's you know what really does it though, and he did it a lot in the World Cup. I don't think it's that special a move because you have to have that kind of ridiculous speed. But when Mbappe would do that, and I actually tell my daughter to do a version of this all the time. It's like a hesitation dribble and then a burst. Like not a heavy touch, but a little touch pass and then just a burst through like a crowd. And it's like, it happens so fast. And I know it's not a particularly amazing move, but the way I don't know. I just like watching Mbappe play. I just wish he would,
he's a freak, actually.
I just not talk about any politics.
Do you know? Okay, what was it? It was yesterday when you were talking with Jackie and Daruba. The one thing, and I get it that why this was missed, but the kind of the sneaky part there is Mbappe was meant to go to Real Madrid last summer, and President Macron calls him and says, "Kylian, I need you to stay en France," and Kylian listened. So like,
is that what it was?
It's part of the puzzle. Basically, where the president of France called Mbappe and basically petitioned him, don't go to Madrid, please stay in Paris. So he signed for another, I think it was a 2-year contract with an option with PSG. Come to find that like we have a situation now in France where, things are kicking off. And now Mbappe's being used effectively, suspiciously by what many assume is a statement that he probably didn't make.
There's no way he wrote that statement.
and any text that's like centered like that, I'm questioning it off top. But yeah, it's just like it's very sneaky that like, and look, if he was with Madrid, he'd probably still put out the same statement. But it's just that the relationship between Macron and Mbappe is just it's icky for me.
But isn't this another parallel to Pele in Brazil? I mean, Brazil made him a national treasure, paid him outrageous money so he wouldn't go to Europe. So all the time people say, well, he can't have been the best because he never played in Europe. Well, whatever. Europe wasn't what it is now, and Brazil paid him outrageously to stay home. And every time he played Europe in the World Cup, he embarrassed them, and they had to hurt him to get him off the field. But anyway, but the same thing was done. And if I'm not mistaken, he was used in a similar way against protests in Brazil, against certain racial classification in Brazil, in racial, or in support of certain racial classification in Brazil. Yeah, so that makes sense. And I'm sorry I missed that. I didn't know that part of
Oh no! Like
that's fascinating.
Like you'd have to be deep into the football space for that to even probably pop up in your mind. But like I feel like that's one of those lost things. Which is like like Mbappe he's being used. So yeah, if only he'd keep quiet. I will truncate the rest of these, and I'll just ask the last one that I always ask everybody. We're making a music festival, Dr. Ball, and I need 3 headline acts for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And last thing, I'll give you permission to raise the dead, so you can bring back anybody you want.
Oh wow!
I need Friday, Saturday, Sunday headliners at Jared Fest, Ball Fest, whatever you want to call it.
If it was Jared Fest and I could raise the dead, I mean, obviously, well, it would just be in all Prince, Jimi Hendrix, and I don't know. Prince Hendrix and Donny Hathaway.
Ooh. But is Donny a festival?
Donny Hathaway. First of all, watch your mouth. Donny Hathaway.
I'm just trying to imagine like the soulfulness. Like, you know what? That might work for Sunday, actually.
Donny Hathaway live at the Fillmore East, and I think they did one at the West. That album's the best album ever in the history of music. So you have to understand what I'm saying here. And he would so now you've offended me. All the other stuff about everything else in sports or whatever, that was. But
I'm thinking like of like, you know, we talk about like Glastonbury or Coachella. I'm just thinking like, would Donnie work? But I think you're right.
You don't know the album. You don't know the work. You gotta go as soon as you finish today.
I know pieces of a man. Like I know the pieces. No. Those kind of records.
That's all great. Go get the Donny Hathaway live and find the extended double. There's really 2. It should be everywhere. But sometimes one streaming service will have one half and another the other half. But there's
Donny live where?
It's at the Fillmore.
The Fillmore.
And it's the album is called Live. So there won't be everything he does. He does Yesterday better than the Beatles. What's Going On better than Marvin Gaye. He does his own. He does a song for you right better. Now. He does. I'm telling you. Wait till you. And the band he's compiled there is perfection. So anyway, but I do want to say very quickly because if it wasn't raising the dead, and then if you got Prince, you don't really need anybody else. But if and then Jimi Hendrix, you know. So it's anyway. But if you took live artists, living artists today, I really would, and I want to keep putting this out into the universe and hope he heals in every way and comes back. But we got to get a D'Angelo. D'Angelo would have to be there. And if folks are not familiar with her, Maimouna Youssef would have to be there. She is the baddest MC singer on the planet. That would be at least part of my, you know,
I'm with it.
Live Jared Fest.
You've swayed me, and I will listen to the album, and I'll probably be more convinced. So,
and then just let me know, with a public apology for that blasphemy, disrespect.
for sure. All right, so Dr. Ball feels very formal.
Yeah, Jared. I don't know why you keep saying it, Jared. You said it.
You know what it is? I feel like if somebody's put in the work to have a PhD. Like it feels right to call you a doctor, just like as honorific.
I mean, you could acknowledge it. Well, first of all, I don't think you should. No one with an honorific degree should be referenced as doctor.
Oh, is that the wrong? Is that the wrong word?
So I know you meant as an honor. I know that's not what you meant. I know what you meant, but I just wanted to say that just because I have a pet peeve going right now. But I think if you just acknowledge it and at the intro as part of the intro or whatever, I think that's enough. Jared is fine.
But this is are all PhDs like that? Do they all have your disposition, or are some so sensitive that you
no. There are some that will demand it. I had and he's somebody I whose work I detest, and I don't mind saying, and I've called it out publicly. Years ago, I interviewed Dr. Peniel Joseph. And Lord. Off air, he asked that I refer to him as doctor because he said, he did the whole thing, brother, there's only a few of us with PhDs. We got to respect it. So I said, fine. But because we got into a debate, he kept calling me Jared. And out of professionalism as a host, I kept calling him Dr. Joseph. So he didn't even adhere to his own request and his own acknowledged so-called principle. So yeah, but so some will request and demand it, and others who are more, I mean, human can just say, hey, look, you've recognized it, you appreciate it, I appreciate it, we can move on.
Well, we'll go with Brother Jared. So, Brother Jared, what do you have coming
That's
out
even my
that
favorite.
that people should know about before we get out of here?
Honestly, I don't know. Just check out Black Power Media, support that channel and all the good work there. Ring the bell, and they won't miss anything. They can follow me at I Mix What I Like, and I'm not entirely sure what's coming next. You know, just hopefully some good and interesting work, but it'll all focus on you know, the issues we've been talking about here for the last hour, and I've really appreciated it. By the way, thank you very much for the invitation. This has been great.
No. Thank you for coming. Guys, thank you for listening. Catch Talking Tactics every Wednesday. And yeah, we'll see you next time talking with somebody. Peace.